The morning sky above Detroit was clear and blue when Jake Morrison first saw them. He was drinking coffee on his front porch, watching his 8-year-old daughter Amy play in the yard. His wife Linda was getting ready for work inside their small house. It was supposed to be another normal Tuesday in 28-7. Then the shadows came. Jake looked up and saw something that made his coffee mug slip from his hands. The mug crashed on the porch steps, but he didn't notice. Above him, a massive ship was blocking out the sun. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The ship was dark metal and stretched across the entire sky like a floating city. "Linda!" Jake shouted. "Linda, get out here now!" Amy stopped playing and looked up. Her small face showed confusion, then fear. "Daddy, what is that thing?" Before Jake could answer, more ships appeared. They came from every direction, filling the sky until there was no blue left to see. The ships were silent, which made them even more frightening. Something that big should make noise? But they moved through the air like ghosts. Linda ran outside, still wearing her nurse uniform. She grabbed Amy and pulled her close. "Jake, what's happening?" Jake didn't know. Nobody did. The ships just hung there in the sky, waiting. All around the neighborhood, people came out of their houses. They stood in their yards and pointed at the sky. Some took pictures with their phones. Others just stared. The silence lasted for exactly 10 minutes. Then everything changed. Beams of red light shot down from the ships. They hit the ground in perfect lines, like someone drawing with a giant laser. Where the beams touched, the earth melted, buildings turned to dust. Cars became puddles of metal. The Detroit Police Department building was gone in 3 seconds. The fire station lasted 2. The red beams moved across the city like a knife cutting through paper. Jake watched his neighbor's house disappear. One moment it was there, the next it was just empty ground. "Run!" Jake grabbed Linda and Amy. "We have to get out of here." They ran to their car, but the engine wouldn't start. The red beams had done something to all the electronics. Cars sat dead in the streets. Phone lines were down. The power was out. In minutes, the aliens had taken away everything that made the modern world work. Jake looked around desperately. Other families were running too, but they had nowhere to go. The ships covered the entire city. The red beams kept moving, destroying everything in neat, organized lines. "The basement," Linda said. "We can hide in the basement." They ran back to their house and down the wooden steps. The basement was dark and cold. Jake found a flashlight and turned it on. Amy was crying quietly. Linda held her tight and whispered that everything would be okay, but Jake knew it wouldn't be okay. Through the small basement window, he could see the red light moving closer. The aliens weren't just attacking Detroit. The radio had been working for a few minutes before it died, and the reports were all the same. New York was under attack. Los Angeles was burning. London was gone. This was happening everywhere. The red light passed over their house. Jake held his breath, waiting to die. But nothing happened. The light moved on. Later, Jake would understand that the aliens weren't trying to kill everyone. They were just destroying anything that could fight back. After 3 hours, the red light stopped. Jake climbed the basement steps and looked outside. Half of Detroit was gone. The other half looked like a war zone. Smoke rose from 100 fires. The smell of burned metal filled the air. The alien ships were still there, but now they were landing. Jake watched as one of them settled on the ruins of the shopping mall. It was even bigger up close, like a metal mountain. Doors opened in the ship's side and things came out. Jake's first thought was that they looked like giant insects. The aliens were tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that looked like dark leather. They wore armor that seemed to be made of the same metal as their ships. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but Jake could see glowing red eyes through the faceplates. The aliens moved in perfect lines. They didn't run or hurry. They just walked through the destroyed city like they owned it, and Jake realized they did own it now. Behind the tall aliens came smaller ones. These looked more like machines than living things. They had wheels instead of legs and carried strange tools. They started cleaning up the destruction, moving the rubble and putting out fires. They worked fast and didn't make any noise. Jake watched from his window as the aliens took control of his neighborhood. They went from house to house, knocking on doors. When people answered, the aliens would point strange devices at them. The people would freeze, then nod and walk away with the aliens. "They're taking everyone," Linda whispered. She was standing behind Jake, holding Amy. "We have to hide," Jake said. "We have to stay quiet until we can figure out what to do." They stayed in the basement for 2 days. Jake would sneak upstairs to get food and water, but mostly they just waited. On the 3rd day, the aliens found them. Jake heard the footsteps on the floor above. Heavy, metal footsteps that shook the house. He turned off the flashlight and pulled Linda and Amy into the corner. They held each other and tried not to breathe. The footsteps stopped at the top of the basement stairs. Jake heard a clicking sound, like metal fingers tapping, then a voice spoke. It was speaking English, but it sounded wrong, like a computer trying to sound human. "Humans in basement, come up now, no harm if you obey." Jake felt Linda shaking. Amy was completely silent, too scared to even cry. Jake knew they had no choice. He had seen what the red beams could do. If they didn't come up, the aliens would just destroy the house with them inside. "Stay behind me," Jake whispered. They climbed the stairs slowly. At the top, 3 aliens waited for them. Up close, they were even more frightening. The red eyes behind their masks seemed to look right through him. One of them held a device that looked like a gun, but it was pointed at the floor. "You will. Come with us," the alien said in that strange computer voice. "You will work, you will obey, you will live." Jake wanted to fight. He wanted to protect his family, but he knew it was useless. These things had destroyed the entire world in 3 hours. What could one man do against that? The aliens led them outside. Jake saw his neighbors walking in lines toward the alien ships. Everyone moved slowly, like they were walking in their sleep. Some of them had small metal devices stuck to their necks. "The adults will receive control devices," the alien explained. "Children under 12 will not. They learn faster." Jake felt sick. Control devices. The aliens were going to put something in his head to make him obey. He looked at Linda and saw the same fear in her eyes. At least Amy was too young. She would still be herself. They walked to the alien ship. Inside, it was all metal walls and strange blue lights. The aliens separated them into groups. Men in one line, women in another, children in a third. Jake tried to stay close to Linda and Amy, but the aliens pushed him away. "Jake," Linda called out. "Jake, I love you. Daddy?" Amy reached for him with her small hands. "Daddy, don't leave me." Jake tried to run to them, but something hit him in the back. He felt electricity shoot through his body and fell to the ground. When he got up, Linda and Amy were gone. An alien stood over him. "You will see them again if you work well. You will not see them again if you do not. Choose wisely." Jake was pushed into a transport vehicle with 50 other men. Through the window, he could see the ruins of Detroit getting smaller. He didn't know where they were taking him. He didn't know if he would ever see his family again, but as the transport flew over the destroyed city, Jake made a promise to himself. He would find a way to fight back. He would find a way to save Linda and Amy. He would find a way to make these aliens pay for what they had done. The aliens had conquered Earth, but they had made one mistake. They had left Jake Morrison alive, and that would be the beginning of their end. The transport vehicle flew for hours before it finally stopped. Jake looked out the window and saw mountains. Big, rocky mountains covered with snow. He was nowhere near Detroit anymore. The air was thin and cold when the aliens forced him out. Of the transport in front of him was a huge hole in the ground. It looked like someone had taken a giant spoon and dug into the mountain. Metal towers stood around the hole, and strange machines moved up and down like elevators. Jake realized this was a mine. "You will dig," an alien guard told him. "You will find uranium. You will not stop until shift ends." Jake had worked with his hands his whole life. He fixed cars and built things, but this was different. The tools were heavy and the work was hard. The altitude made it difficult to breathe. His hands were bleeding after the first day. The other men in the mine were from all over the world. Jake met Carlos Martinez, who used to fix electrical systems in Mexico City. There was Pete Collins, who had been a soldier in the army, Ruth. Baker was a scientist who studied rocks and minerals. They all had the same look in their eyes, the look of people who had lost everything. The aliens watched them work, but they didn't seem to care very much. The guards were tall and thin, and they moved slowly. They carried energy weapons that could kill a man instantly, but they acted bored most of the time. Jake noticed that they rotated the guards every few weeks. New aliens would come and the old ones would leave. "They think this job is beneath them," Carlos whispered during a break. "Look how they act, like they're too good to be here." Jake watched the guards more carefully. Carlos was right. The aliens stood far away from the humans. They didn't talk to each other much. When they did talk, it was always about following orders. They never seemed to think for themselves. "Back in the army, we called that a weakness," Pete said quietly. "When the enemy doesn't adapt, you can beat them." But Jake didn't see how they could beat anything. The aliens had weapons that could vaporize a person. They had ships that could destroy cities. And every human over 12 had a control device implanted in their neck. The small metal chip made sure they obeyed orders. Jake touched the device on his own neck. It felt cold and hard under his skin. Sometimes it would buzz, and he would feel the urge to do whatever the aliens wanted. But Jake noticed something strange. The feeling was stronger when he was close to the alien guards. When he was deep in the mine, the buzzing was weaker. "Carlos," Jake said one night in the barracks, "you know about electrical things, right?" "Yeah, I fixed power lines and generators." "Why? These things in our necks, they're electronic, right? Could they be jammed somehow?" Carlos looked around to make sure no guards were listening. "Maybe, but we'd need to know the frequency. And we'd need a lot of power to block the signal." Jake started paying attention to everything. He watched how the guards moved. He studied their equipment. He listened to how they talked. The aliens had a strict system. The higher-ranked ones gave orders, and the lower-ranked ones followed them exactly. No one questioned anything. Ruth helped him understand the mine better. She showed him maps of all the tunnels and caves. "This whole mountain is connected underground," she said. "There are old mining tunnels that go for miles. Some of them connect to other mines." "Other mines?" Jake asked. "Yeah, there are 12 facilities like this one just in this region. All connected by old tunnels that the aliens don't know about." Jake felt something spark in his chest. Hope. If the mines were connected, maybe the people were too. Maybe they could organize something. But first, he needed to solve the problem of the control devices. Jake started watching Carlos work on the electrical systems in the mine. The alien technology was advanced, but it still used basic principles. Power flowed through cables. Machines needed electricity to run, and electricity could be controlled. "Look at this," Carlos said one day. He was working on a power generator deep in the mine. The aliens used the same frequency for everything. Their communications, their weapons, even these control devices. It's like they never thought someone might use that against them. Jake stared at the generator. It was huge and powerful, designed to run all the equipment in the mine. "Could we modify this? Make it send out a signal instead of just power?" "Maybe, but it would take weeks to make the changes. And we'd need parts that we don't have." "What kind of parts?" Carlos thought for a moment. "Rare earth elements, specific metals. That can focus electromagnetic energy. The problem is, those metals are exactly what we're mining for the aliens." Jake almost laughed. The aliens were making humans dig up the very materials that could be used to fight them. It was like they were giving their enemies the weapons to defeat them, but Jake needed more than just the materials. He needed a way to communicate with the other minds. He needed to organize resistance without the aliens finding out. And he needed to do it all without triggering the control devices. The answer came from an unexpected source. There was an old man in the mine named Frank Wilson. He had been a radio operator in the military years ago. Frank told Jake about something called ham radio. "Before the invasion, there were thousands of us," Frank said. "People who talked to each other using radio signals. Some of those people might still be out there, hiding in places where the aliens can't find them. Frank had built a small radio receiver using parts from broken mining equipment. He hid it in one of the deep tunnels where the alien surveillance was weakest. Late at night, when the guards were sleeping, he would listen to the static. "I've heard voices," Frank whispered. "People talking in code. There are others fighting back." Jake started joining Frank on these midnight listening sessions. They heard fragments of conversations from around the world. A group in the Australian mines had found a way to disrupt alien communications for short periods. Resistance fighters in the European facilities had discovered that the aliens' energy weapons didn't work well in cold weather. In South America, miners had found tunnels that led directly under alien command posts. Slowly, Jake began to understand that the resistance wasn't just one man or one group. It was happening everywhere. Humans were fighting back in small ways all over the planet. They just needed someone to coordinate their efforts. Jake started sending his own messages. He used codes that Pete had taught him from his military days. He told other resistance groups about the frequency weakness Carlos had discovered. He shared Ruth's maps of the tunnel systems. He organized a network of people who were all working toward the same goal. The aliens never suspected anything. They saw humans as simple workers who were too stupid to fight back. They didn't understand that humans could adapt and learn. They didn't realize that their greatest strength, their superior technology, was also their greatest weakness. They had become so dependent on their machines that they couldn't think without them. Jake's group grew carefully. They recruited people who could be trusted. Carlos trained others to work on the electrical systems. Ruth mapped more tunnels and found connections to other facilities. Pete taught combat techniques that could be used with improvised weapons. Frank expanded the radio network to reach resistance groups on other continents, but Jake knew that communication wasn't enough. They needed a plan. They needed something that could hit the aliens everywhere at once. And they needed to do it before the aliens realized what was happening. The breakthrough came when Carlos discovered that the mine's main generator could be modified to produce an electromagnetic pulse. Not just a small signal, but a massive burst of energy that could disrupt every control device for hundreds of miles. "The problem is power," Carlos explained. "We'd need to connect multiple generators to create a pulse strong enough to reach other continents. And we'd need to activate them all at exactly the same time." Jake looked at the map Ruth had drawn. 12 mining facilities in their region alone, hundreds more around the world, each one with a powerful generator, each one with a growing resistance. "Group, what if we could coordinate with all of them?" Jake asked. "What if we could get every resistance group to modify their generators and activate them simultaneously?" Carlos's eyes widened. That could work. If we could synchronize the pulse, globally it would free every human on Earth at the same time. But Jake knew the plan was dangerous. If the aliens discovered what they were doing, everyone would be killed. And even if they succeeded, the aliens still had their weapons and their ships. Freeing humans from the control devices would only be the beginning of the fight. Jake thought about Linda and Amy. He wondered if they were still alive. He wondered if they were being forced to work in some alien facility, hoping that he would come for them. The thought gave him strength. "We're going to do this," Jake said to his small group of conspirators. "We're going to free every human on Earth, and then we're going to make these aliens pay for what they've done." Pete smiled for the first time since the invasion. "About time." "I was getting tired of digging holes for these bugs." Carlos nodded. "I can have the modifications ready in 2 weeks, but we'll need to be careful. One mistake and we're all dead." Ruth spread out her maps. "I've found a route that leads directly under the alien command post. If we can get close enough, we might be able to disrupt their communications during the pulse." Jake looked at his friends. Jake had been working in the mine for almost a year when everything changed. The resistance network was growing stronger every day. Carlos had finished modifying the generators in their facility and 3 others nearby. Ruth had mapped tunnel systems that connected to 12 different mining operations. Frank's radio network now reached resistance groups on every continent, but then Commander Vex arrived. Jake knew something was wrong the moment he saw the new alien. Vex was different from the regular guards. He was taller, with darker armor that seemed to absorb light. His red eyes were brighter, and they moved constantly, studying everything. When he spoke, his voice was clearer than the other aliens, more human-like. "Production in this facility has decreased," Vex announced to the guards. "I am here to investigate why." Jake felt his stomach drop. The resistance had been careful, but they couldn't hide everything. The time they spent on secret projects meant less time mining uranium. The electrical modifications Carlos had made changed the mine's power consumption. If Vex was smart enough to notice these things, they were in serious trouble. Vex began inspecting the mine section by section. He brought strange devices that scanned everything. He questioned the alien guards about their routines. He studied the work reports from the past 6 months. Jake watched him from a distance and saw intelligence in those red eyes. This wasn't just another lazy guard. This was someone who could think. "We have a problem," Carlos whispered during their lunch break. "He's noticed the changes to the power systems." He asked the guards about unusual electrical activity. "How?" "Long before he figures it out," Jake asked. "Maybe a week. Maybe less. The modifications aren't something you can hide forever." Jake felt the weight of the situation. If Vex discovered their plans, it wouldn't just affect their mine. The aliens would investigate every facility. They would find the resistance networks. They would execute everyone involved. A year of careful planning would be destroyed. "We need to get rid of him," Pete said quietly. Before he can report back, Jake had been thinking the same thing. But killing a high-ranking alien would bring even more attention. The aliens would send investigators. They would tear the mine apart looking for answers. Unless ... double quotes, what if it looked like an accident? Jake asked. Ruth looked up from her geological maps. "There's a section of tunnel in level 7 that's been unstable for months. The support beams are old, and the rock is cracked. It wouldn't take much to cause a collapse." "Could we get Vex down there?" Jake asked. "Maybe, if we made it look like there was something important to investigate." Jake thought about the plan. It was risky, but everything they did now was risky. If they didn't stop Vex, the resistance would be finished. If they did stop him, they might buy enough time to complete their mission. "Frank, can you send a message to the other groups?" Jake asked. "Tell them to accelerate their timeline. We might not have much time left." Frank nodded. "I'll send the message tonight." The next morning, Jake put the plan into action. He and Carlos went to the unstable section of tunnel and loosened several support beams, and made it look like normal. Wear and tear, nothing that would seem suspicious. Then they planted evidence that would draw Vex's attention. Carlos left some of his tools in the area, tools that showed signs of being used for electrical work. Jake scattered some rare earth minerals around, making it look like someone had been mining in secret. They created a puzzle that would make Vex curious enough to investigate personally. The plan worked. That afternoon, Vex noticed the evidence during his inspection. He questioned the guards about who had been working in that section. He studied the tools and the scattered minerals. Jake could see the alien's mind working, trying to figure out what had been happening. "I will inspect this area personally," Vex announced. "There may be unauthorized activity." Jake felt his heart racing. This was it. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Vex descended into level 7 with 2 guards. Jake and Carlos followed. At a distance, pretending to do routine maintenance work, they watched as Vex examined the evidence they had planted. The alien commander was smart, but he was also arrogant. He didn't suspect that humans could be clever enough to set a trap. When Vex was directly under the weakened section of tunnel, Jake gave Carlos the signal. Carlos triggered a small explosive they had made from mining equipment. The blast was carefully calculated to look like a natural collapse. The old support beams gave way, and tons of rock came crashing down. The noise was tremendous. Gust filled the air, and the ground shook. When everything settled, Vex and his 2 guards were buried under a mountain of stone. Jake felt sick about what he had done, but he knew it was necessary. The resistance had to survive. The other alien guards rushed to the scene. They dug frantically, trying to reach their commander, but it was too late. Vex was dead, crushed under the weight of the earth he had tried to control. Accident, one of the guards said in their strange computer voice. Structural failure? Commander Vex dead. Jake breathed a sigh of relief. The aliens believed it was an accident, but his relief was short-lived. Within hours, a new message came through the alien communication system. The High Command was sending a full investigation team. They were also implementing new security measures at all mining facilities. We're running out of time, Frank reported after listening to alien communications. They're going to install new monitoring systems, they're increasing guard rotations, and they're going to put neural inhibitors in all the humans. What are neural inhibitors? Jake asked. Devices that prevent independent thought. The control chips we have now just make us obey orders. These new devices will stop us from thinking for ourselves at all. Jake felt cold. If the aliens installed neural inhibitors, the resistance would be finished. They would become true slaves, unable to think or plan or fight back. The electromagnetic pulse wouldn't matter because humans wouldn't be able to remember who they used to be. How long do we have? Jake asked. The shipment of inhibitors arrives in 48 hours. They'll start installing them immediately. Jake looked at his friends. Carlos was working frantically on the generator modifications. Ruth was updating her maps. Pete was teaching combat techniques to new recruits. Frank was coordinating with resistance groups around the world. They had all worked so hard, but now they were out of time. We launched the Pulse in 48 hours, Jake announced. Whether we're ready or not, the next 2 days were a blur of activity. Messages flew between resistance groups on every continent. Carlos worked around the clock to finish the generator modifications. Ruth guided teams through the tunnel systems to set up equipment. Pete distributed improvised weapons to anyone who could use them, but Jake knew that the electromagnetic pulse was only the beginning. Even if they freed every human on Earth from the control devices, they would still face the alien ships and their advanced weapons. The aliens had conquered 17 planets before Earth. They wouldn't give up easily. Jake needed a way to level the playing field. He needed to find the aliens' command center and disrupt their ability to coordinate their forces. If he could cut off the head of the snake, the body might die. Ruth had discovered something important in her tunnel mapping. There was an old subway system that ran directly under the city where the main alien command ship was hovering. The tunnels were flooded and abandoned, but they provided a way to get close to the enemy without being detected. I can get you there, Ruth said, but it's a one-way trip. The tunnels are partially collapsed and the water is contaminated. You might not make it back? Jake thought about Linda and Amy. He had received a coded message through the resistance network. They were alive, but they were being held in a facility that was scheduled for something called liquidation. The aliens were planning to eliminate most of the human population in the next few days. Jake had to act now, or his family would die. I'm going, Jake said. If I can get to their command ship, I might be able to turn their own weapons against them. Carlos handed him a portable version of the electromagnetic pulse generator. This should disrupt their systems for a few minutes, but it's only got one charge. Pete gave him a combat knife and some basic explosives. These won't do much against their armor, but they might help you get past their defenses. Frank showed him a small radio. This will let you coordinate with the global resistance. When you're ready, we'll trigger the pulse worldwide. Jake looked at his friends one last time. They were just ordinary people who had been forced into an extraordinary situation. But they had become something more. They had become the hope of humanity. If I don't make it back, Jake said, finish what we started, free our people. Make them pay for what they've done. Jake descended into the dark tunnels beneath the city. The water was cold and murky, and strange sounds echoed in the darkness. But he kept moving forward. Driven by the knowledge that millions of lives depended on his success. Above him, the alien command ship hung in the sky like a metal cloud. Inside that ship was the key to humanity's freedom. Jake just had to reach it before time ran out. The final battle was about to begin. Jake crawled through the flooded tunnel for hours. The water was up to his chest and smelled like chemicals. Strange lights flickered in the distance, and he could hear the hum of alien machinery above him. The subway tunnel was cracked and broken, with chunks of concrete falling into the dark water. When he finally reached the end of the tunnel, Jake found himself directly beneath the alien command ship. The massive vessel hung just 50 feet above the ruined subway station. Strange blue beams of light connected the ship to the ground, and Jake could see alien guards moving back and forth. Jake activated his radio and whispered into it. "Frank, are you there?" "I'm here," came the crackling reply. "Are you in position?" "Yeah, I can see the command ship." "How much time do we have?" "The neural inhibitor installation starts in 6 hours. The global pulse is ready to activate on your signal." Jake took a deep breath. 6 hours to infiltrate the most heavily guarded alien facility on Earth. 6 hours to find a way to turn their weapons against them. 6 hours to save his family and the rest of humanity. He climbed out of the flooded tunnel and studied the area. The alien ship had extended metal walkways down to the ground. Guards patrolled these walkways in regular patterns. Jake watched them for an hour, timing their movements. The aliens were predictable. They followed the same routes at the same times, never changing their patterns. Jake used the portable pulse generator that Carlos had given him. He aimed it at the nearest guard and activated it. The alien stumbled and fell, his armor sparking. The device had disrupted the alien's electronics for a few seconds, just long enough for Jake to grab the unconscious guard and drag him into the shadows. The alien armor was too big for Jake, but he managed to put on the helmet and chest piece. From a distance, he might pass for one of them. He picked up the alien's weapon and started walking toward the ship's entrance. His heart was pounding as he approached the walkway. 2 guards stood at the entrance, but they barely looked at him. Jake realized that the alien's rigid system was working in his favor. They didn't question anyone who looked like they belonged there. Inside the ship, Jake was amazed by what he saw. The walls were covered with screens showing images from all over Earth. He could see mining facilities, agricultural camps, and cities under alien control. The aliens were monitoring everything. Jake moved through the corridors carefully. The ship was huge, with dozens of levels and hundreds of rooms. He needed to find the command center, but he didn't know where it was. He followed the main corridor, hoping it would lead him to the right place. Then he heard voices. Alien voices speaking in their own language. Jake hid behind a corner and listened. He couldn't understand the words, but he could tell they were talking about something important. One of the voices sounded different from the others, more authoritative. Jake peered around the corner and saw 3 aliens standing in front of a large door. One of them was bigger than the others, with more elaborate armor. This had to be a high-ranking commander. Jake decided to follow them. The door opened, and the aliens entered what was clearly the command center. Jake waited a moment, then slipped inside behind them. The room was enormous, with a curved ceiling that showed a view of the Earth below. Dozens of aliens worked at control stations, managing operations across the planet. In the center of the room stood the largest alien Jake had ever seen. This one wore golden armor and moved with the confidence of absolute authority. When he spoke, all the other aliens stopped what they were doing and listened. Jake hid behind a bank of computers and tried to understand what was happening. The golden alien was studying reports on a large screen. Jake could see numbers and charts, but he couldn't read the alien language. Then the screen changed to show images that made Jake's blood run cold. The images showed human camps, agricultural facilities where people were forced to grow food for the aliens. The screen displayed statistics about human population, productivity, and something called optimization schedules. Jake realized he was looking at the aliens' plans for humanity. The golden alien spoke, and the words were translated by the ship's computer. Population reduction will begin tomorrow. Maintain 10 million specimens for breeding programs, eliminate the rest. Efficiency will improve with smaller numbers. Jake felt sick. The aliens were planning to kill most of the human race. They wanted to keep just enough people alive to serve as slaves and breeding stock. Everyone else would die, including Linda and Amy. The alien continued speaking. 17 worlds have been successfully optimized using this method. Earth will be no different. Begin the liquidation protocol immediately. Jake knew he had to act. He pulled out his radio and whispered urgently, "Frank, activate the pulse now. They're starting the liquidation tomorrow. Are you sure?" Frank's voice crackled back. "We're not fully ready. Do it now. There's no more time." Jake heard Frank relay the message to resistance groups around the world. In mining facilities and hidden bunkers across the globe, humans began activating modified generators. The electromagnetic pulse would hit every continent simultaneously, freeing billions of people from their control devices, but Jake knew that freeing the humans was only half the battle. He had to find a way to stop the aliens from carrying out their liquidation plan. He studied the command center, looking for something he could use. Then he saw it. A large control panel that seemed to manage the ship's weapons systems. The screen showed the locations of every alien ship on Earth. Hundreds of vessels hung over major cities, armed with the same red beam weapons that had destroyed Earth's defenses. Jake realized that all the alien ships were connected to this command center. If he could gain control of the weapon systems, he could turn the aliens' own firepower against them. But first, he had to deal with the aliens in the room. The electromagnetic pulse hit at that moment. Every screen in the command center flickered and went dark. Emergency lights came on, bathing everything in red. The aliens shouted in confusion as their systems failed. Jake saw his chance. He pulled out the explosives Pete had given him and threw them at the main power coupling. The explosion knocked several aliens to the ground and sent sparks flying across the room. The golden alien turned toward Jake, his red eyes blazing with fury. "Human, how did you get in here?" Jake didn't answer. He ran toward the weapons control panel, dodging energy blasts from the alien guards. The pulse generator had disrupted their systems, but their weapons were starting to work again. Jake reached the control panel and started pressing buttons at random. He couldn't read the alien symbols, but he could see the pattern of the controls. The weapons targeting system was similar to the mining equipment he had worked with. Power flows, targeting coordinates, firing sequences. The principles were the same. "Stop him!" the golden alien roared. "He must not reach the planetary bombardment system." Planetary bombardment. Jake realized that the aliens had weapons powerful enough to destroy entire continents. They could kill every human on Earth with the push of a button. He had to stop them. More guards poured into the command center. Jake felt energy blasts searing past his head. One hit his stolen armor and knocked him to his knees. But he kept working at the control panel, trying to understand the alien systems. Then he found it. A master control that seemed to link all the weapon systems together. If he could reverse the targeting, he could make the alien ships fire on each other instead of on human targets. Jake's fingers flew over the controls. He heard the golden alien approaching behind him, speaking words that the computer translated. "You primitive creature, you think you can defeat us? We have conquered 17 worlds. We are superior in every way." Jake turned around and looked the alien commander in his glowing red eyes. "Maybe you are superior. Maybe your technology is better than ours, but you made one mistake." "What mistake?" the alien demanded. "You left us alive long enough to learn how to fight back." Jake pressed the final button on the weapons control panel. Every alien ship in Earth's atmosphere suddenly turned its weapons on the nearest alien vessel. Red beams of destruction lanced through the sky as the invasion fleet began destroying itself. The golden alien raised his weapon to kill Jake. But it was too late. The command ship shuddered as it was hit by fire from its own fleet. Explosions rocked the vessel, and the artificial gravity began to fail. Jake grabbed his radio as the ship started to fall from the sky. "Frank, the pulse worked. The ships are destroying each other. Jake, the humans are free. They're fighting back everywhere." Through the command center's windows, Jake could see the alien ships falling like burning stars. On the ground below, millions of humans were emerging from camps and facilities no longer controlled by the neural devices. The resistance had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, but Jake's victory came at a cost. The command ship was crashing, and he was trapped inside with dozens of angry aliens. As the vessel plummeted toward the Earth, Jake thought about Linda and Amy. He hoped they were safe. He hoped they would understand that everything he had done was for them. The ship hit the ground with tremendous force. Jake felt himself flying through the air, then everything went dark. Jake woke up in a hospital bed 3 weeks later. His head was wrapped in bandages and his left arm was in a cast. The first thing he saw was sunlight streaming through a real window. Not the artificial lights of the mine, but actual sunshine. Nurse was checking his chart. She looked up when she saw his eyes open. "You're awake. Doctor, he's awake. Where am I?" Jake asked. His voice was rough and dry. "Denver General Hospital. You've been unconscious for 3 weeks. You're lucky to be alive." Jake tried to sit up, but pain shot through his body. "The aliens... the ships... Gone," the nurse said with a smile. "All gone. You did it. You saved everyone." A doctor came into the room. He was an older man with kind eyes. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Dr. Johnson. You've been through quite an ordeal. The rescue teams found you in the wreckage of that alien ship. You had a severe concussion and multiple broken bones, but you're going to be fine." "My family," Jake said urgently. "My wife Linda and my daughter Amy, are they... Dr. Johnson smiled. "They're safe. They're here in the hospital waiting to see you. Would you like me to get them?" Jake felt tears running down his face. "Yes, please." A few minutes later, Linda and Amy rushed into the room. Amy looked taller than Jake remembered, and Linda was thinner, but they were alive. They were real. They hugged him carefully, trying not to hurt his injuries. "Daddy!" Amy cried. "I knew you would come for us." Linda kissed his forehead. "We heard what you did. Everyone's talking about it. You freed the whole world." Jake held his family close. For the first time in over a year, he felt complete. But he needed to know what had happened while he was unconscious. "Tell me everything," Jake said. Dr. Johnson pulled up a chair. The electromagnetic pulse worked perfectly. Every control device on Earth stopped working at the same moment. Humans everywhere suddenly remembered who they were and started fighting back. What about the aliens? When their ships started firing on each other, most of them were destroyed within hours. The few that survived tried to land and fight on the ground, but they couldn't handle it. Without their technology, they were no match for angry humans. Linda took Jake's hand. "The aliens at our facility didn't know what to do when their weapons stopped working. The humans overpowered them in minutes. It was like they had never learned to fight without their machines." Amy nodded eagerly. "And people all over the world helped each other. The ham radio operators coordinated rescue missions. The miners taught people how to use the alien technology. Everyone worked together," Jake smiled. "That sounded like humanity." When faced with a crisis, people came together and helped each other. It was something the aliens had never understood. "What happened to the golden alien?" Jake asked. "The commander?" Dr. Johnson's expression grew serious. "Supreme Commander. Crow? He survived the crash, but he's in custody. We've learned a lot from interrogating him." "Like what?" "He told us about the other worlds the aliens conquered. 17 planets, all destroyed the same way they tried to destroy Earth. Billions of innocent people killed." Jake felt anger building inside him. Where are those worlds now? Most of them are dead. But some might have survivors hiding underground. Or in remote areas. There are teams being organized to go look for them. Jake thought about that. Entire civilizations wiped out because they couldn't fight back effectively. Earth had been lucky. If the resistance hadn't worked together, if they hadn't found the aliens' weaknesses, humanity would have been destroyed too. What about Earth? Jake asked. "How bad is the damage?" Linda squeezed his hand. "It's bad, but we're rebuilding. The alien technology is helping. We've learned how to use their power sources and manufacturing systems. Some cities are already being reconstructed. Dr. Johnson nodded. The aliens' equipment is incredibly advanced. We're using their medical technology to heal people faster. Their energy systems can power entire cities without pollution. Their transportation methods are revolutionizing travel. But we're being careful, Amy added. Everyone remembers what happened when we relied too much on technology we didn't understand. Jake was proud of his daughter. At 9 years old, she understood something that many adults have forgotten. Technology was a tool, not a master. Humans had to stay in control. Over the next few days, visitors came to see Jake. Carlos arrived with updates on the mining operations. The resistance groups had converted the facilities into research centers where humans studied alien technology. They were learning how to build better weapons and defenses. Pete brought news from the military. The surviving human forces were being reorganized into a planetary defense system. They were using alien ships and weapons, but with human crews and human leadership. Never again would Earth be caught unprepared. Ruth showed him maps of the reconstruction efforts. Cities were being rebuilt with better designs, using both human knowledge and alien technology. The new buildings could withstand attacks and provide shelter for everyone. Frank had the most interesting news. The ham radio network had become the foundation for a new global communication system. People all over the world were staying in contact, sharing information and resources. The aliens had tried to divide humanity, but the resistance had brought them closer together. There's something else, Frank said quietly. We've been monitoring alien communications from other parts of the galaxy. There are more of them out there. The invasion of Earth was just one small part of a much larger empire. Jake felt a chill. Are they coming back? Not anytime soon. But eventually they might try again, or they might send word to other alien species about what happened here. Jake nodded. He had expected this. The fight for Earth was over, but the fight for humanity's survival was just beginning. A month later, Jake was released from the hospital. He and his family moved into a small house in one of the new communities being built outside Denver. The house had walls made from alien materials that were stronger than steel, and solar panels that used alien technology to generate unlimited clean energy. Jake was offered many important jobs. The government wanted him to lead the planetary defense forces. Corporations wanted him to head their research divisions. Universities wanted him to teach strategy and leadership, but Jake turned them all down. He had spent a year fighting aliens. He had sacrificed everything to save his family and his world. Now he wanted to live a normal life. Instead, Jake opened a small repair shop where he fixed cars and appliances. But he also worked on alien technology, helping people understand how to use it safely. He taught classes on self-defense and emergency preparedness. He wanted to make sure that humans would never be helpless again. In the evenings, Jake would sit on his porch with Linda and Amy, watching the sunset. Sometimes alien ships would pass overhead, but these were human-piloted vessels on patrol duty. The sight of them made Jake feel proud and safe. Amy was growing up fast. She studied both human history and alien technology in school. She wanted to be an engineer like her father, but she also wanted to explore space and find the survivors of the 17 destroyed worlds. Do you think we'll meet other aliens someday? Amy asked one evening. Jake considered the question. Probably. The universe is a big place. There are probably lots of different species out there. Will they be friendly? Some might be. Others might not, but we'll be ready for them. We know how to fight now. More importantly, we know how to work together, Linda smiled. And we know that being human isn't a weakness. It's our strength. Jake looked at his family and thought about all the humans working together around the world. They were rebuilding, learning, and preparing for whatever came next. The aliens had come to Earth expecting to find another helpless planet to exploit. Instead, they had found humanity. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 worlds, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the species that refused to give up hope. As Jake watched the stars appear in the darkening sky, he smiled. Somewhere out there, other aliens might be planning to invade Earth, But they would find a very different planet than the one the Zephyrians had attacked. They would find a world where humans had learned from their mistakes and were ready to defend themselves. The message that Frank's radio network broadcast into space every night was simple but clear. We are human, we survived, we remember, and we are ready. Jake Morrison had kept his promise. He had found a way to fight back. He had saved his family, and he had made the aliens regret the day they decided to conquer Earth.